Frustrated your guitars collapse the moment you hit play when they should punch you in the chest like a freight train, just like the records you worship? In this video, I'm pulling back the curtain on tricks pros use to deliver wide as hell in-your-face wall of guitars that slice through a mix and dares anyone to ignore them. And to take what you'll discover in this video and start cranking out tones people blow up your DMs over, I made you a cheat sheet I probably shouldn't be giving away. It's called the Wall of Sound Cheat Sheet. It's the unfair shortcut to unlocking tones that sit shoulder to shoulder with the ones that inspire you and make people stop and ask how you're doing it. So when I first started recording out of a den in my parents' house nearly 2 decades ago, I was obsessed with figuring out why don't my guitars sound as big as the records I love. I tried every trick I can find, like tightening the panning during the verses and then hard panning left and right during the choruses, EQing the left and right a little bit differently, quad tracking, and just creating all sorts of layers on the guitars and hoping and praying that they would work. None of it worked. And even after dropping a buttload of cash on audio school, I was still getting thin 2D guitars that vanished the second I hit play. But everything changed when I got a front row seat on major label sessions working inside the world's largest online school for rock and metal producers, and later learning directly from my mentor, Beau Burchell. And what I saw completely flipped my approach. A lot of pros follow a series of steps that unlocks the wall of tone in a mix that we're all after. It's now what I call the post-tone stack system. So now I'll pull back the curtain on 5 moves from that system you can steal right now that will give you 80% of the pro level wall of tone for your own mixes. Starting with understanding a subtle mistake I was making with my guitars. See, probably like you, I would go in and I would track a left and a right guitar DI signal. And then I'd run them through the same amp sim, but then when I listened to them compared to other records, they always fell flat. And here's why. When you're using an amp sim, you're not capturing the tiny imperfections that happen when you're using a real amp, a real mic, and a real preamp. Those subtle differences are what help make the guitars feel wider and alive in a track. With amp sims, you're basically getting a carbon copy on the left and the right channels. So when I started digging into pro sessions, a solution to this that I noticed was something subtle but really powerful. A lot of pros just add a touch of saturation on each side, just enough variation so the guitars felt wider. And a lot of common plugins I see for this are Decapitator, Radiator, Saturn, but my go-to currently is Prefire from Submission Audio. Then came another technique that threw everything I was taught out the window, because I'd always been taught, like probably most people, that distorted guitars don't need compression. The distortion already adds the compression. But when I looked into what pros were actually doing, they were using an extreme form of compression. And it's pretty common to see limiters and sometimes even clippers used to make the guitars huge, locked in, and sitting perfectly in the pocket. And my own spin on this technique that I often prefer over using a regular limiter or clipper is using a maximizer or exciter like Sonic's Inflator and feeding that into Renaissance Axe, which is one of the most overlooked plugins to use on guitars. Another thing I noticed when digging into pro sessions is a lot of pros lean on tape saturation at some point in their guitar buses. This helps because distorted guitars can get harsh and brittle, and using tape has this magical way of just smoothing out some of those frequencies. It helps rounding out the edges so they sit polished in the mix without losing their power and impact. Now, knowing this, and at the same time, I knew that Chris Lord-Alge had his own signature trick to get his vocals sounding huge by offsetting the left and right delay channels, just enough to create separation and width. That's when I had a light bulb moment of what if I can combine the two. So using a plugin like Satin, because it gives me tape saturation and tape style delay with 2 tape heads. By slightly offsetting the dual tape heads on the left and the right, I'm able to build width while still getting the smooth qualities of tape. From there, layering in some stereo sweetening, using plugins like Waves S1 or BX Shred Spread helps nudge the guitars to make them a little bit wider in the stereo field. Now, even after picking up all these handful of insights, I hit another roadblock. Every time I made my guitars bigger, I lost clarity in the center of my mix. I thought it was an EQ issue on my guitars when this would happen, but the real problem was something I didn't even know existed. When you use stereo processors, you can accidentally create a ghost image in the middle that muddies up your mix. It's what's referred to as a phantom center. Once I figured that out, the fix was pretty simple thanks to a plugin from Bertom Audio called Phantom Center, where I can filter out the low and the high end in the center of the ghost image. Suddenly, my center instruments hit harder and my guitars sound even wider just by removing some of this phantom energy. That's the power of the post-tone stack system, and once I started using it, I finally had guitars that sounded like they belonged on real records. Just listen to these guitars before using the steps in the post-tone stack system. And now the guitars after using the steps from the post-tone stack system. And if you're ready to take what you just discovered and start releasing tones that make people wonder how the hell you're doing it, The Wall of Sound cheat sheet is your unfair edge to unlocking pro results today. But if you think size alone is enough to make your guitar stand out, think again. Without punch, even the biggest tones just get buried and forgotten. So in this video, I'll show you the secret plugins pros use to make guitars cut straight through the mix without killing the tone that you love.